Hi, this is Bobby from RaisinBoat.com. In this video, we'll explore different uses for the stamp set Chalk It Up by Raisin Boat. This is one of my favorite go-to sets for making teenage and youth cards. I like using the handwritten and fun messages. I also love to use this frame for a number of different ways too, which I'm going to show you today. The first most obvious use for the frame in the set is a chalkboard, and we've put a lot of fun graphical words and images in the set that look like you would write them on a chalkboard. When you pair this set with our other set, Chalk Talk, your phrasing ability to tailor your creations is endless. If you're in a hurry, these two sets both have a lot of words that are ready to use. Here's a card that I made that incorporates the chalkboard with some of the words including happy birthday and number one teacher. Now, to make this chalkboard, simply cut a piece of cardstock or dark green cardstock that is 2 1/8 inches by 3 1/4 inch. It'll fit inside the frame perfectly. Then I like to add a lot of chalk residue on the cardstock by sponging on some white pigment ink before I stamp my message. I think it gives it a more authentic look. Just use a pigment ink pad, a little sponge, and just add it onto the cardstock randomly, and you'll get this look of chalk residue. Then you can stamp directly on it with your phrasing. I think it just gives it a lot more authentic look and totally resembles a chalkboard. Now, to complete this look on this card, I added some fun chalk-looking strokes on the background in bright colors using the stroke from the stamp set, Strokes of Pride. The star in this set would also be really fun to use as a background too. Lastly, I added this little cake from Icing on the Cake to the card along with some baker's twine in some bright colors. And there you have a really easy and fun birthday card. Another way to use the frame from the set is to create a bulletin board like I did here on my next card. I wanted to create a scene out of a school hallway, so I added some lockers along the wall adjacent to the bulletin board. Now, to create the bulletin board, all I did was stamp the frame from the set Chalk It Up. Then I masked off the frame and stamped inside with corkboard. Now, then I filled it in with my Copics to create a tan look. Now, another way you could do that is simply cut a piece of tan cardstock, 2 1/8 by 3 1/4, and stamp it using corkboard. And I think this actually gives even a better, more realistic look than what I've actually achieved here. Now notice I took a lot of the cool little graphical images from the set Chalk It Up and I embellished the locker, as well as taking a number of the images from Varsity Locker and embellished the bulletin board. Now what's fun about these sets is that you can use them to tailor your card for your recipient. For example, this may be for a soccer player who is graduating. So I could do different elements, including adding an athletic gear or ball here to the bottom to tailor for the individual. Just a side note, Varsity Locker is designed to include distressing and shadowing already in the images. So if you're not a great colorer, no worries. This set looks great simply because of the way it was drawn. It's also easy to create a bank of lockers by repetitively stamping the locker image in a row. So you can make a whole row of lockers and maybe even have one of the lockers open up and include a fun message. So this is another way to use the set. The third way to use the frame from Chalk It Up is to create a window. In this next example, I created a double hung window for our little cat here to enjoy, and this is super easy to do. First, stamp your frame, cut it out, then mask off the sides. I've got 2 post-it notes here that I'll just put on each of the long sides. Now you'll want to take a ruler and just figure out kind of the center point for your window. And then just make little marks at that point. And then take your frame stamp, ink it up, and you just need the short end inked of the frame. and go ahead and stamp where you made those markings, which will be about your center spot. Remove the mass, and you've got a double hung window. Now you could do the same thing by adding another strip down here if you wanted a four pane window as well. Now here's a tip in cutting out the window, because we need each of these panes to be open. I simply use a punch, and I just put it right up into the corners, and I punch out the center, just moving my punch so that I get all of the white out. Now sometimes I'll have a little piece here which I can just snip with my scissors, or I can just go back and clean it up with my punch. And I just find that this is just quicker and easier than getting out an X-Acto knife and cutting it with a ruler and an X-Acto. You can see how quick this goes. And again, you can do a little cleanup or just go back and do a quick punch to get any remaining white out of the window. The last step on the window is to create a scene for my window. So I cut a piece of cardstock slightly smaller than the outer dimensions of my frame. I wanted my scene to look like it was in the country, so I stamped 2 trees from the stamp set Heart and Soul. This is such a nice tree to use. I colored the tree in various greens and added a very light colored blue sky, as you can see here. To finish the card, I added our cat from Personality, and he's on top of the shelf from the set Grandma's Kitchen. There's also a really cute little design element in Grandma's Kitchen that I used to create the interior wallpaper of the room. So after I stamped it, I just did a little sponging and some Copic coloring to make it look like kind of an old-fashioned wallpaper. I also popped this shelf with some dimensions to create a more dimensional looking space. Lastly, I used some pearl pen in dark brown for hardware on the double hung window, and I also added some pearl pen in copper for the knobs and the metal work on the shelf. And lastly, I added a phrase from the set Personality, some fun little banners just to dress it up a little and add some color, and this makes a great card for just about anyone. Another way to use the frame is to create open shelving. I wanted this card to look like there was a set of open shelves in between 2 cabinets. To create the look, I used the wood plank image from our stamp set Handyman. To make the cabinets, I first started by stamping 3 frames in a row, centering the middle frame first, then adding 1 on each side. If these frames don't line up perfectly, just use a ruler and a pen and draw a nice line across the top and the bottom, and it will look perfect every time. Next, I masked off each of the frames all around and stamped the wood plank in the inside. I've gone ahead and masked off my entire center frame. Now I'm just going to ink up my wood plank and stamp that in the center. Now it's important when you're stamping the same image multiple times to flip it over and also alternate it right to left. This will help you avoid having any kind of a repetitive, unnatural looking wood grain appear on your shelf or on your cabinet. Just line them up and keep moving them back and forth and just make it each a little bit different. And you can tell how much of a shift that you're doing by just looking at your mask sides. Once you've completed all of your stamping, now you just need to color it in. And one thing that's important is to make sure that you've got some good shadowing all around the interior and the exterior moldings so that it appears like there's some really good dimension in your cabinets. And I like to use some cooler grays all the way down to a C9, and then it's really a matter of preference in terms of what brown tones you want your wood to take on. If you want more of a natural cherry appearance, of course you're going to want some red browns. If you want it to look more like an oak or a walnut, you'll want some more, maybe use a light walnut or walnut color Copic in here, along with maybe some caramel, and you'll get some really beautiful looks. Next, I added some interior shelves by stamping the wood plank on another piece of cardstock and cutting some strips that will fit within the frame perfectly. And then comes the fun part, and that is adding things to your shelves. In this example, I used a number of the elements from the set Grandma's Kitchen, including the shelf that's right at the bottom here, the teacups that are hanging off the shelf, along with the fabulous pie, the jar of heart cookies, coffee beans, and the little hot pad I used as well. And so this gives you just a really fun way to dress up your shelves and tailor it for the recipient receiving the card as well. Our last idea is to make a wood cabinet, and this one opens and includes some really fun little designs in it. I made this into a baby card. I just wanted to kind of change it up from the last sample. So what I did is first I created my cabinet, and to do that you're just going to stamp the frame on cardstock, and you want to cut the cardstock to be two of the frames next to each other. You'll stamp one on this side and then one on the back side but on the opposite end. Score in the middle, and you've got the beginning of your cabinet. Now what I also did is I colored it up, and when I colored the front, of course, the Copic bled through and went right through into the inside of my cabinet. So what I did here is I not only stamped the planking on the inside of the cabinet and the exterior front door, but also the interior front door. Now you can still see some of my deeper shadow bleeding in the corners. I didn't mind this. I thought it looked a little bit like kind of a distressed older cabinet that you might find in an older farmhouse. So I thought that was kind of cool, and I left it that way. Now I added some open shelving like the last example we showed, and then I added some interior pieces from the set Goes with Hope Maternity Gal. The calendar I thought was just such a cute idea to put on the inside of the cabinet. I also used the jar of hearts, again from Grandma's Kitchen that you saw in the last example, along with some other baby elements from Goes with Hope Maternity Gal. Then to finish it off, I added this Welcome Little One on a banner. That's from the stamp set Onesie. Now lastly, you can see I've got kind of the look of wallpaper as if this cabinet was on an interior wall in your home, and that again was created by using that little design from the set Grandma's Kitchen. Now it would have been fun and maybe a better idea to have done little hearts, would have been cute, but at the time I was kind of into that little design. Sponged on top of them, added a little bit of Copic coloring just for a little shadowing around my card, and then added this neat little banner. Now the last thing I wanted to point out to you is the hardware of this cabinet. Not only did I use pearl pen to create the kitchen knob in a silver chrome, but I also added very thin magnetic strips on this side and this side of my cabinet door. So that way my cabinet stays shut. And in fact, it's attracted to it, so it closes kind of like a regular cabinet would close. Now to do that, what I did is I used black magnet strips. And you can see they're sort of tucked away here and sort of disguised by the shadowing that I did with my Copic coloring. And I used a very thin sheet of magnet, and it also has an adhesive back. So you can run this through your paper trimmer, cut very small slices of the magnet, and then adhere them to the inside, front, and on this side of the back to keep the cabinet closed. And there you have it, 5 ways to use our set Chalk It Up, and especially using the frame in this set.